So this week we've been seeing a lot of each other. Usually you only see me once a week, but next week we are inundated with school visits and Cub and Scout visits, so this is how it's worked out. But in a way it's good because it gives me a little bit of continuity in this series which I'm doing at the moment on enlightened living, which is gradually working its way through a subsection on topics concerning family harmony. And the big picture is that all of these are values or virtues or practices contained within the Buddhist scriptures, especially a particular teaching called the Mangala Sutta, which are arranged as a sort of 38 steps towards enlightenment, starting with the most basic and working to more esoteric ones. And at this point we are up to about number 14 in the series, and the last few that we've been looking at have been to do with family values of various sorts. So looking after one's parents, looking after one's children, looking after one's spouse, and seemingly unconnected, but maybe not so far off, is this idea of the work ethic within Buddhism. You might say it's a work ethic because in several other religions they also have this idea of not tolerating laziness. And in this respect, you could say that in Buddhism too there is this sense that if we wish to support family harmony, then if we have already ticked all the boxes in cherishing our parents, children and spouse, if we neglect to be lively in earning our living, then money troubles will eventually lead to family infighting. So from a financial point of view, it's necessary to devote oneself, at least to a certain extent, to earning one's living in order to support our children, to have a legacy to pass on to them, to support one's spouse and one's parents. So in Buddhism, to work hard is almost seen as a way of expressing gratitude or giving something back for all the time, energy, education, love and patience invested in us by all our kind parents and teachers and even the state. So if we receive all those things but we don't put our skills to some good use, then all that investment would be seen to have gone to waste. So sometimes in traditional Buddhism, a lazy person would also be seen as an ungrateful person. So if you're someone who already has all the knowledge, vocational knowledge from blessing number 7 on having heard many teachings, if you also have all the craftsmanship skills from blessing number 8, then it still doesn't guarantee that you will do something with that knowledge. So you might have all the theory, you might have all the skills, but if you don't do anything with it, even people with the best of education sometimes make no impact on their work if they never get around to doing it. So an alternative title for this blessing is sometimes non-prevarication, just to give you an idea of where I'm going with it today. So sometimes the best of people prevaricate, and it's not always because they are a lazy person. And there have been some studies of this, probably for obvious reasons, or these bosses who have to overcome such problems in their workplace. And the sort of reasons that people don't get around to doing things, even when they know it is such a great idea to get on with doing all the things they're so good at, is that they may feel fear of being judged for their lack of ability. So maybe they lack confidence about their ability and they would rather be seen to fail in the task because they haven't had enough time to do it, and then rush at the last moment and make a mess of it anyway, and be able to blame that for the fact that it hasn't turned out right, than to not have some other excuse for shoddy workmanship. Some people, it's the opposite. It's out of perfectionism. Or it might be the opposite again, that some people are afraid of appearing to try too hard. They don't want to appear to be a goody-goody, so they sort of beat around the bush. Or if they do that and then it still comes out okay, then it looks like it's a fluke and they still get the cred ratings for it. Or some people have the idea that work expands to fill the time available, so may as well fit in a few other things first before you get round to the real task, because if you only use the remaining time available, then it takes less time, right? But generally the actual work doesn't come out quite as well done as you intended. Some people procrastinate to send a message to their boss out of resentment, the fact they're being controlled, as a way to give back power to the underdog, to say, get off my back to their boss when they feel they're being taken for granted. So they do a sort of go slow, so the boss gets all sort of hot under the collar and then appreciates them more afterwards. That's the idea anyway. And some people procrastinate to control distance in relationships. But whatever the reason, the Buddha taught that procrastination, whether it's in your workplace or even in spiritual tasks like working on yourself to become enlightened or whatever, it limits your ability to earn your living and will be something that endangers harmony in your family life. So what are the reasons that people procrastinate, given that they know it's such a terrible thing? And there's a fun way to explain this, which is sort of like pop psychology, but there's a guy who is a specialist in this, and his name is Tim Urban, and he has a blog called Wait But Why, and he even did a TED Talk on it. And he proposed the difference between what goes on inside the heads of those who are more or less prone to procrastinate. And for a non-procrastinator, then you have someone called a rational decision maker as your sort of numbskull at the wheel inside your brain. And they remain firmly at the wheel and everything comes out on time and you always do the best thing that is needed in your life. However, the cast in the brain of a procrastinator is slightly more elaborate. And they have a couple of extra sidekicks on board, one of whom is called the instant gratification monkey. And on the other side, in the red, is someone called the panic monster. And for as long as there's no pressure, then generally the instant gratification monkey gets to be the one at the wheel. So they live in the present moment and they care only about what is easy and fun. And in other words, they have very little to do with making sense in life. So any thoughts about guilt or dread or anxiety or deadlines or unfinished work, they're all completely forgotten for as long as the monkey is in control. Unfortunately, the only person who the monkey will listen to is not the rational decision maker, but the panic monster. And for as long as the panic monster doesn't appear, then the monkey has great fun doing all the things which are a complete waste of time, but great fun at the time. Until eventually the deadline looms, and who comes out? The nasty, scary panic monster. And this happens whenever a deadline gets too close, or there's danger of public embarrassment, or a career disaster, or some other scary consequence. And when the panic monster wakes up, then everyone gets scared. And generally it's that point that the monkey heads for the hills or for the trees and relinquishes the wheel back to the rational decision maker. So that's when something eventually gets done. Pretty simple, right? But unfortunately, many of the important things in our lives don't have deadlines attached to them. Whether it's seeing your family or exercising, taking care of your health, working on a relationship, or getting in or out of a relationship, or even meditating, there are no imposed deadlines. So the panic monster doesn't really get a look in to shake us out of our complacency. And it's in this sort of long-term kind of procrastination that it's much less visible or dramatic than the short-term based deadline, which I've been talking about with all these characters in our brain. And it can lead, therefore, to a lot of long-term unhappiness and regrets about how our life has gone. And we might feel frustrated at the end of all that we haven't managed to live our dreams because we haven't ever got round to chasing them in the first place. And this is somehow the sneakiest trick in the repertoire of the instant gratification monkey. That we are left complacent when there's no deadlines there at all. So, work has two sorts, at least when you're talking about it in a temple context. And when we talk about leaving work undone, then we can talk about physical work that puts food on the table. And indeed, we cannot survive without it, or its means to feed ourselves and our families. But as you may well know, families or ourselves cannot survive by bread alone. And therefore there's a second sort of nourishment which is also important, which you could count as work, which is nourishment for the mind. And when we're talking about not leaving one's work undone or not prevaricating, then it means not kicking the can down the road in terms of spiritual work on ourselves as well. So we've had the monkeys in the mind, we've had the panic monster, but even knowing what can go on in our brain or in our head or our blind spots, we still sometimes make a hash of getting work finished. And some people in any office get a reputation for having a big backlog of work. And if you're ever looking for some work that's not finished yet, then you can be pretty sure it's on their desk somewhere. This is the sort of person who has all the work stacked in the in tray and nothing in the out tray. And you might say, oh, well, it's just because that person is lazy or whatever. But often, as we said earlier, it's not laziness pure and simple. Sometimes it's down to technique in the working situation, which means that they are frustrated to the point that they never get something done. And it might be because of wrong timing or wrong technique, or never getting started, or superstitious thinking, or even not making a genuine effort. First reason, wrong timing might mean doing work at the wrong time, or it might mean with the wrong timing. For example, if you plow a field out of season, then the weeds will grow back before you have sown your crop. Yeah? Wrong timing. Or it might mean whether you do something quickly or slowly. If you rush into things that don't require it, then you might ruin the job. For example, if you rush into throwing a pot on a potter's wheel, then you probably will not get a pot, but you get some sort of abstract art instead. But if you're slow in some things when speed is required, then that can also be a disaster. For example, you're best to study when you're young. If you study when you're old, then you don't have the grey matter left to remember everything anymore, for example. Some people suffer from wrong technique. For example, trying to do something individually where you need to ask for help. So people who are embarrassed to ask for help, try to lift a heavy object and do their back in. They're not good, and work doesn't get finished. Third reason is never getting started, and apart from all the managerial reasons I mentioned for prevarication, one extra reason is that some people are superstitious, and this thing about waiting for the portentous time to start doing something. Any horoscope fans here? Look up the horoscope first before you decide whether to start on a new venture. Not so much. Not even lottery numbers. Try to work out what the lucky lottery number is going to be by consulting the horoscopes. No, you're all very rational, I can tell. But gamblers especially are rather prone to this sort of magical thinking. Meditators like us, though, are those who take destiny in our own hands, and of course we're not interested in such things at all. Because often the simple fact of getting down to doing something, as soon as you know you're ready to do it, usually will guarantee success in that task. You don't need to wait for some sort of luck to sort of guarantee that something you get down to doing is going to work out. So you don't need to waste money on fortune tellers. Just if you're ready and you feel ready, then go for it. Yes. And some people may not be genuine in their efforts. They may be distracted, usually in the playground of the instant gratification monkey, but sometimes such people are accused of not being genuine in their efforts. And there are a series of distractions which can put people off getting down to their real task at hand. Sometimes it's obsession with things like food, eating. If you are a complete foodie, any possible antidotes for that you can think of? Well, they say you can go on a meditation retreat with 2 meals a day so that you get used to not having food sometimes. Or you can always try being a monk, where they mix up all the food together in their bowl, whether it's savory or sweet, and just think of food for its calorific value instead. Obsession with sleeping. Possibly you can try a less luxurious bed. Obsession with intoxicants, whether it's alcohol, tobacco, or recreational drugs. For these, it's usually not a question of moderation anymore, but complete abstention, which will help you out, rather than just moderating the intake. Romance. You may need to spend less time obsessing over your dating life, whether you're swiping left or right these days. Obsession with entertainment. You might think there's not much harm in entertainment, but some people can become junkies for things like soaps or sport, in a way that can be no less serious than for intoxicants. Gambling. Often for this you would need to confess your addiction to some sort of sponsor and maybe voluntarily restrict your access to credit cards. Obsession with bad friends. You need to avoid getting in with people who idolize, sort of taking shortcuts in earning a living, and maybe pick slightly more diligent role models. And especially laziness. If you want to get down to it, what does laziness actually mean? Often it means having too many excuses for everything about why you can't do whatever work is at hand. So the moment you stop having an excuse for everything, usually the laziness will disappear. For people who are lazy, it's either too hot or too cold to do anything, it's too early or too late to do anything, or your health isn't quite up to it yet because you're just getting over some illness that you had, or you look like you're about to be ill. So in the end, there's no time that's good for you to do the work. So if you feel that you are a lazy person, then you have to keep track of your excuse-making abilities. Yes. And lastly, some people are not lazy, but they just have incompatible working hours. They work at a time when everyone else is resting. So anything that requires teamwork or cooperation, they fail at that. So sometimes it's not just wrong timing or too quick, too fast, but it's the fact they do it at a different time from everyone else and therefore fail to get any teamwork. So these are all the symptoms of a person who never gets round to doing the work. The signs of prevarication, in other words. And just to finish off with for today, before I propose some solutions to all of this, which I'll do in the next installment of this, which you might have to wait a week or so for. So instead of ticking the now box, you have to hold your breath for 7 days or so until you get the answer to what to do about all this. And in the meantime, I will leave you with a story about a person who had quite a lot of entrepreneurial acumen, let's say. And it's a story that comes from 2,000 years ago, in the time of the Buddha, when there was once a millionaire, and he had a servant who was traveling with him in an oxen cart, I guess it was, in the middle of India. And the servant was a very poor man, and he happens to be the protagonist of the story. And as they're going along in their cart, the millionaire pointed out a dead mouse at the side of the road. And he said to his servant, if someone had the proper principles of working as a salesman, even with such a dead mouse, they could set themselves up in life. So hearing that, the servant immediately jumped down from the cart and allowed the millionaire to go home on his own. He picked up the mouse and he took the millionaire's advice to heart. And because he knew a lot of people in the area, some of whom had cats, and he knew that compassionate people who have a cat, hungry cat, won't want to kill mice on their own. So, and cats have to have something to eat every day. So off he went to these houses, and he managed to sell the dead mouse to one of these cat owners for a few cents. And with those cents, he bought some sugarcane juice from the people who were crushing the sugarcane. So, go to the supplier. And he asked for another bucket of plain water and then set himself up at the gate of the town with his sugarcane juice and his bucket of water, waiting for all the flower gatherers to come back from gathering flowers all day long. And of course, their work was very thirsty work out under the sun all day long. And they reached the city gates tired and thirsty, and lo and behold, there was this guy selling plain water, first of all, first cup, and then the second cup would be that of sugarcane juice. And after they slaked their thirst on the water, then he gave them a second cup of sugarcane juice. And they didn't know how to pay him, so they left him each with a little sample of the flowers that they had collected, jasmine flowers, and he took those and he sold them again for a small profit. And the next day he had a little bit more sugarcane juice and water than before. And again he sold it to more flower gatherers until he was able to extend his clientele not just to the flower gatherers but also to the people collecting firewood as well. And in addition to the flowers, he now also had a pile of firewood to sell off at the end of the day. And he kept his eyes and his ears open, and before long he noticed that in the night there had been a storm, and there were a lot of broken branches and twigs and so on that had been blown down in the night. So today, instead, he took his sugarcane juice and his water along to the forest, and he offered his services to the forest keeper to clean up the broken branches for free. Because the forester agreed to this very readily, because he knew he could now have an easy day. And then the servant guy, he offered free sugarcane juice to any of the children playing in the area who would help him gather up the branches and twigs. And eventually they all helped him, and they're very happy to do that instead of playing at something else. And he had ended up with a huge pile of firewood. He sold the firewood to a potter, and out of the proceeds from that, he was able to buy a big barrel. And this time, where he had sold sugarcane juice by the bucket before, he was now able to sell it by the barrel. And he bartered sugarcane juice for flowers, for firewood, and even for fodder. And that day, a big caravan of traders passed through with many hungry horses. And he told the stable boys in the palace not to sell their fodder to anyone, and he sold his own fodder at quite a good price. And it turned out it wasn't enough for all the horses, so this time the palace were also able to sell fodder for the same high price, and everyone got a profit out of it. And he carried on working in this way until eventually he was able to put down a deposit on a trading ship. So bucket, barrel, ship, and his ship kept on trading until he had amassed a small fortune for himself of 100,000 kahapanas, which happened to be the currency at the time. And in the end, he returned to his old friend and boss, the millionaire, and presented him with the 100,000 which he had earned, saying, "Thank you out of gratitude, because all of his wealth had come from the fact that that millionaire had given him that throwaway comment a long time ago when they were sitting in the ox cart, that even a dead mouse can be the source of a person's fortune." And the millionaire was so impressed by the man that he actually returned to him the fortune tenfold, and also gave him his daughter's hand in marriage. So at this point, in case you have to wait 7 days to find out what to do about prevarication, we have a summary from the Buddha that diligence is the path to the deathless, whereas procrastination is the path of death, mostly in spiritual matters, I should add. The diligent never die, but those who procrastinate are as good as already dead. So understanding this distinctly, those who are skilled in diligence rejoice in diligence, and will be able to delight in the pasture of the noble ones. In this respect, as with work in the workplace, so it is with meditation. And for those of you who have already enjoyed meditation today, found that it's some use to you, I would advocate trying a little meditation every day if you can. Maybe starting out with 20 minutes a day at a time of the day which is convenient for you. If you're a morning person, that might be first thing in the morning. If you are a person with problems getting to sleep at night, then it might be last thing before going to bed. Or if you have a stressful job, then it might mean meditating in your lunch break. But if you can fit in 20 minutes a day, then you will see improvement day by day. Maybe good days, maybe bad days, but on aggregate, you will see an improvement in your meditation, being able to go further and faster in your meditation practice. Some people find it difficult to remember what to do in their meditation, in which case we have an app for that, and you can download a map called MindGem, which has more than 100 audio tracks on it of different meditation instructions, which you can follow along with as you are meditating. And you can even set a timer for yourself to be able to come out of your meditation at the time you've set for yourself. Apart from that, in this particular meditation center, we have classes every Tuesday and Thursday in person now. The only difference being that on Tuesday nights it's a little bit of a shorter meditation, 30 minutes, and 45 minutes on a Thursday night. Apart from that, we have, as a remnant from the pandemic times, still a meditation Europe-wide on a Saturday evening between 7 and 8, where there's a talk and a meditation which you can follow along with if you type in those Zoom particulars. And once a month we usually also have a online and sometimes in person too, full moon meditation, which is a little bit more elaborate, a little bit longer, and usually it involves lighting something ceremonial along the way. But this month, as it is the month of May, it happens to be a special day in the Buddhist calendar as well, which is the Buddha's birthday. So Vesak Day, as it's called, is something that we're celebrating in person here as well. You can see some of the preparations going on outside with the candle lanterns, and we're taking the Buddha here outside to hold an outdoor ceremony. So keep your fingers crossed for us that we have nice weather, more on the heat wave side than on the rainy downpour side for the Sunday evening between 6 and 8. If you'd like to dress in white for that, that would be appropriate as well if you'd like to attend in person. If you want to watch online, that's also possible with the usual Zoom channel coordinates. For those who like to study what it's like to be a monk, in the month of June this year we are once again able to provide a temporary ordination scheme for 2 weeks for ordination starting on the 4th of June. And if you wish to stay on for longer, you can finish out the whole month as in monastic robes for gentlemen, that is. And the next weekend retreat that we have organized here is for the 8th to the 10th of July. If you look at the website, themeditationsurrey.com, then you'll see all the details there. There is a cost involved, but it is inclusive for accommodation, food, and meditation during that time as well. And it's not organized here this time, but in a nice place down in Somerset. So get the beautiful nature of the West Country as part of the meditation practice as well.